Keynote speaker, Mr. David Humphry. Mr. David Humphry is currently at the University of Michigan, where he is the Diversity and Inclusion Officer for the School of Education. In his current role, he does the implementation of diversity, inclusion, justice, and equity strategic planning. He also develops programs, training, as well as recruitment, helps with admissions, mentoring, curriculum, scholarships, and training. He does just a few things over there at the University of Michigan. Mr. Humphry is married to his amazing partner, Dominique, who they've been married for 9 years, and they are raising their 4 wonderful sons. He's worked both at private institutions as well as in the public sector. He is a jazz and justice-loving scholar. He's guided by his radical love ethic. Having the heart of a practitioner, the mind of a scholar, and the spirit of an entrepreneur, his unique approach to his work of educational justice has allowed him to build a remarkable track record of success, developing workshops and training modules that further the rigorous exploration of diverse ideas, narratives, viewpoints, and dialogues across differences. Again, without further ado, it's my honor, my pleasure to introduce to you our keynote speaker, Mr. David Humphry.
Good morning. Oh, I can hear myself. All right. How is everyone doing this morning? Doing okay? How about as I get settled, let's check in with the person next to you. Ask them how they're doing. Ask them how their morning was. So I hope to create a non-traditional keynote today. I'm going to create a space where we center emotion, we welcome you to feel, we welcome you to reflect. Ultimately, we welcome you to be. I think being is being human. That's what being human is about, is being, right? We should work to foster educational spaces that encourage our students to be. So we should encourage emotion. We should encourage people to feel, to relate. And through that process, we create this opportunity to become more fully human. Education should be about the business of humanizing folks. So we hope to create a space here that allows us to humanize each other by getting to know each other. But before I move any further, I want to begin by acknowledging that this campus resides on the traditional territories of the 3 Fire peoples, the Ojibwe, Ottawa, and Bodewadmi. And as we work, live, and play on these territories, we must keep in mind the ongoing effects of colonization, communities of struggle for self-determination, colonial state violence, and the recognition of indigenous sovereignty. I would like to take also a moment to thank Professor Christina Marshall for the invitation to come and share with the Baker community during this Unity Summit. I feel like Christina and my other colleagues send me to places to get in trouble. I'm always the one that will say what everybody else is thinking. So I'm hip to your game today, all right? Hey. I give honor to the administrators, dignitaries, and public servants who are here today. To all the faculty, I salute you. The administrators, I feel the burn. Nobody's gonna laugh on that one? All right. Are there any administrators here? I mean, okay. Tough crowd already. Okay, y'all nervous, okay. To my beautiful partner and 4 amazing boys who love me unconditionally, I honor them even in their absence today. I am the descendant of African slaves whose shoulders I now stand upon and who are a part of my great cloud of witnesses. Before my ancestors were kidnapped and brought to this country in the mid-18th century, They occupied the lands of Guinea-Bissau. I am a descendant of the Fula or Fulani peoples, a pastoral people. I am a son, a brother, a father, a husband, a black, cisgendered, heterosexual man, a Christian, a mystic, an educator, a scholar, a practitioner. This is how I enter this space. These identities are all critical dimensions through which I see and make sense of this world. They make up my worldview, my standpoint, and my positionality. This is my name. This is how I see the world. The apparatus of inequality in this country and around the globe did not begin with actions. They begin with sight. A particular and limited positionality constructed a narrow view, a mythos of this world based upon what they saw or what they think they saw. Inequalities has its genesis in what Emily Towns identifies in her book, Womanist Ethics and the Cultural Production of Evil, as the, quote, fantastic hegemonic imagination, end quote. Inequality began with myth-making, with socially constructed memories, stories, and histories crafted about certain groups of people without their consent. Emily Towns notes that the powerless, the minoritized, or disenfranchised are often welcomed to the historical dance, but given no face, no voice, no name, and no legs to dance. Two examples of this include, one being the sexually racist memories and narratives that are faced by the queer and trans folks of color, the fetishizing and exoticizing of queer and trans folks of color, social exclusion, the LGBTQ media erasure, systemic violence, legal discrimination, and lack of institutional representation seeks to reduce them to objects devoid of agency, or simply background singers to white, queer, and trans folks. These sexually racist myths are so seductive that these queer and trans bodies are erased from major historical events. For example, the black and brown trans women who were pivotal in the Stonewall riots, Sylvia Rivera, Marsha P. Johnson, and Miss Major. The second example is the Mammy, Jezebel, and Sapphire tropes inflicted on black women, which are age-old racist, classist memories and histories that reproduce the narrative that black women are merely beasts of burden, meant to carry the weight of the world, to be the object of folks' sexual desires, even in the classroom. Or black women are always angry, especially if their voice raises just a little bit. You will be amazed in my research, my dissertation research in particular that looks at black women, scholars who identify as womanists, the amount of objectification that they experience in the classroom. These are the impact of seeing. These myths, these horrible memories and histories that impact the way that we see certain bodies. These myths, see, they are powerful. They carry an analytic that sustains norms, values, and policy that reproduce structural inequality. We must get to the point where we no longer allow ourselves to be governed by these memories, these histories that are constructed by privileged folks about the other. So what is your name? What informs your worldview? What is your story? See, the way we name ourselves is a reflection of who we are. And the malleability of a person's story must be self-determined. How does who you are shape what you know about the world? These are questions that we must ask ourselves. To ask these questions begins the journey to developing what I call a radical self-reflexivity, which is, in other words, changing the way we see ourselves and others. And this is what opens the door to what Robin D.G. Kelly calls freedom dreaming. This lays the seeds for liberation. So let's begin with the questions that I just mentioned. You've heard my name. You know all about me now. Now, you probably sat next to a person that you knew. I mean, it's just human behavior. We sit next to folks who, you got to be real different to sit next, like you got to be a real cool person just like, you know what, I'm just going to jump into the middle of the ocean and sit next to folk that I don't know, you know. But most of you, raise your hand if you sat next to a person that you know. And I see some folks shaking their head with pride like, yeah, I didn't. I'm one of those people that you spoke about, right? Well, what I want to do is I want to get us into the mode of asking people what their name is. So turn to the person next to you and tell them your name for the next 3 minutes. How many of you do this in your class? How many of you do this in your classes? How many of you ask your students who they are, what their stories are, what their narratives are? Or do we just presume neutrality? Are we presuming sameness? Who our students are, their stories and their narratives are brought into our classroom whether we want to believe it or not. They impact the way our students learn. If as educators we are not asking who our students are, how they access this world, how they construct knowledge, we're creating inequity in the classroom. Because not knowing who our students are is not knowing how they access information. And therefore, you're creating an inequity in access to information and knowledge. We can't expect our students to access and understand the same way. And if we're really about the business at Baker College of preparing the next generation of leaders to pursue civically engaged and democratic thinking in society, then we need to be prepared to create jazz in our classes. I'll tell you what I mean by jazz in just a second, but this is Thelonious Monk here. If you can turn this up just a little bit. I think there's something significant that I want us to learn about the monk man today. The title of this keynote is called Why We Can't Wait Any Longer. Jazz, Freedom Dreaming, and Teaching Towards Liberation. So listen, I love jazz. I love jazz. I was introduced to jazz by a friend, Dr. Raymond Carr, philosopher and theologian that's on faculty at Pepperdine University in Malibu, California. To be more specific, Dr. Carr introduced me to Thelonious Monk. There's jazz, and then there's Thelonious Monk. And with this introduction, I saw jazz as more than a kind of music. Monk, for me, represents a way of being, a critical, existential space that is both healing and pain, hope and despair. What Hans-Georg Gadamer, a German philosopher, called both a strangeness and a familiarity. Monk, for me, represents the potential of community. Thelonious Monk once said, as eloquently as he says, quote, "The piano ain't got no notes," end quote. When Dr. Carr introduced me to the Monk, he said that Monk was known to play between the cracks. Monk was able to not be confined by either the white or black notes on the piano, because he transcended the notes. And through the conflict and dissonance, was able to compose soulful music unlike anything. His music humanized me, but not in a colorblind, race-neutral way. See, let me digress for a bit. We must resist this colorblind logic that seeks to ascribe to ideas of community that are immune, rather resistant to conflict and difference. This, "we all are human," is a cop-out to critical and systemic thinking. Yes, we all are human, and that is what matters. However, due to colonialism, racism, heterosexism, ableism, imperialism, classism, just to name a few, certain bodies are always at risk. With these ideas of unity, somebody, oftentimes the historically minoritized folks, pay a price for this version of unity. At this moment, babies are being ripped from their parents and placed in detention camps. Black and brown bodies are being profiled and murdered at the hands of police. Women are still making less money than men. Little black girls are being criminalized in schools. According to the discipline data for girls, that was a report done by the Department of Education, the Office for Civil Rights, black girls are 6 times more likely than white girls to be suspended. 3 times more likely to receive 1 or more in-school suspensions than white female students. 3 times more likely to be restrained than white female students. 2 times more likely to receive corporal punishment than white female students. And 4 times more likely to be arrested than white female students. And 3 times more likely to be referred to law enforcement than white females. We cannot wait any longer to act. We have to resist this temptation to pursue sameness. It's not what makes us human. Difference is what makes us human. There can be no unity without conflict. There can be no struggle. There can be no progress without struggle. Now back to Monk. I'm sorry, I digress sometimes. I'm also a preacher too, y'all. So I don't know if you ascribe to a faith tradition, but in my faith tradition, preachers always seem to get distracted. So that was my distraction. Thank you for laughing. Now back to Monk. As I said before, his music, his jazz humanized me. It was the clashing of different sounds and notes that helped me to get in touch with myself. It provided me with a dimension of truth that was previously unrevealed to me. The cacophony of sounds made me fall in love with myself, with my blackness. It also increased my capacity to engage difference in myself and others. Listen, the power of diversity is to provide an opportunity to expose you to a dimension of truth that was previously unrevealed to you. But the irony of it all is you can't get to know people if you don't know yourself. This is why it's so important, because as we get to know others, aspects of ourselves are revealed. Things that we never knew about ourselves are removed from the blinders, and we become more fully human in the process. As I understand queer folks, not only is my heterosexual assumptions called into question, but my notions about masculinity and identity are reevaluated. I become more human. As I get to know my white siblings, I get to know aspects of myself that I didn't know existed. My Latinx, my Asian, my Native American, indigenous folks, I become more human through these interactions. But I have to be first willing to deal with myself. Now, I talked about how Monk increased my capacity to engage difference in myself and others. I want to show you why Monk is so significant to me. I'm going to give you an example right here. Take a listen. I don't know what you noticed, but I noticed a lot of clashing. I noticed a cacophony of sounds at times. But ultimately, I noticed that it fit with the whole. That the passion that he had for jazz transcended the black and white keys on the piano. And it was a commitment to build a sound that had never been heard before. It was a commitment to play between the cracks. It was a commitment to do what had never been done before. To transcend what was expected. To sit in the tension between the known and the unknown. Emily Towns said that unity is only vigorous in an atmosphere that is unafraid of difference and diversity. An atmosphere that does not view difference as a barrier, but rather as my favorite part, proverbial stew whose aroma is richer and whose substance provides greater sustenance for the work of justice. If done right and partnered with the oftentimes contrasting values of inclusion and equity, being in a diverse environment, engaging with diverse ideas, bodies that look differently, act differently, and come from different geographical locations and philosophies have the potential to expose you to something new. To unlock a door of the aspect of your identity that has never been revealed before. But something much deeper happens, and something much deeper is possible. Jazz. Jazz is concerned with justice. This is what Towns was talking about above. Jazz requires a state of radical self-reflexivity, a state of radical seeing, dreaming, creativity, and a commitment to actively working to change the social order. But to do jazz, we must commit to changing the way we see. Jazz values improvisation, creativity, and imagination. For a moment, I want to focus on the curriculum, which is in many ways one of the biggest ways that our seeing is manifested in the classroom. Ooh-wee. If you want to get faculty upset about something, talk about the curriculum. Y'all can laugh. Come on now. You're not going to get in trouble. It's the truth. Okay. Y'all still nervous. All right. American-born racism, sexism, and classism are all powered by presumed normativity of certain things. And this normativity gives certain people rights and privileges and exclusive rights to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. This plays out in particular ways in the curriculum theory, especially as the influence of neoliberal and educational ideas, which mean the turning of education into merely a product. Education becomes something merely to be consumed and not something that transforms. That's neoliberalism. Teachers are highly susceptible to reinforcing what I call these epistemologies of power and conquest through a lack of self-reflection. And this is what allows these norms and values to remain unsettled in the curriculum. In this particular section, I draw upon the interpretive, normative, and critical qualities that are intrinsic in Patricia Hill Collins' work, specifically her idea of visionary pragmatism. And bell hooks, anyone knows bell hooks? Okay. Bell hooks' notion of critical spectatorship. To offer a way for you to combat the objectifying effects and the temptations currently in operation in education. American democracy, buckle up your seatbelts, and capitalism are all based upon ownership. Civil rights are wedded to the construction of individual rights. Historically, African Americans presented incongruence because they could not own property. They were considered property. According to Harris, being white increased the possibility of controlling critical aspects of one's life, rather than being the object of others' domination. Whiteness, according to Harris, carries a sense of interactivity that enables it to engage reality with ease. Society was made to make its existence normative. The same thing with heterosexuals. Society is meant to make your existence at ease and normal. The images on TV, the educational material that you use in your classrooms. What messages do your students receive when they see it? What voices are you crediting with teaching certain ideas in your classroom? What racial, what gendered identities do they represent? This is why Coates explained that there were two realities in schools. Whites are taught to conquer, or he argued those who think that they're white. Because there's really no such thing as whiteness and blackness, right? These are racial ideas. These are a part of the racial mythos. Some folk are getting uncomfortable. It's fine. But blacks are taught to be subordinate and disciplined. See, but the thing is we can't create a culture that's post-racial until we deal with the racial idea that persists in our current culture. Colorblindness is not the way. It merely allows racist ideas to remain firmly unsettled. In Truth and Method, Gadamer argued that the process of understanding and interpretation and the pursuit of truth and knowledge is a normative aspect of human experience. We are meant to understand and be understood. And it's not tied to any method. You don't have to be a scientist to understand anything. It's a part of being human. For this reason, history does not belong to us. We belong to it. It is possible, rather it is impossible for understanding and meaning to be divorced from prejudices or traditions in histories. How one first interprets and understands is in fact tempered by our primary interlocutors, our primary message givers when we were children, the primary institutions that we habitate as adults, our family, society, states, and traditions. So our prejudices, wrote Gadamer, were constituted by the mere historical reality of our being. They are constituted by the fact that we all are situated in a certain historical time, in a particular social location, in a particular geographical reality. This is what constitutes our outlook in life. Consequently, meaning is relative to the context, both historically as well as ontologically, meaning the way that you construct your idea of self is both situated within the historical idea as well as how you were made to make sense of who you are. One that understands and develops their way in which they interpret reality via this reality. As Gadamer put it, the variety of voices and which form our identity both come from the past and our present. Whether you want to believe it or not, just like my ancestors inform who I am, your ancestors shape who you are. Curriculum in this regard carries a very distinct combination of both implicit and explicit norms, beliefs, and epistemic values. Does everyone know what I mean by epistemic or epistemology? All right. These ideas give shape and form to unique outlooks and policies that guide instruction. Guess what? We create curriculum based upon our own prejudiced idea of what knowledge construction is, whether you realize it or not. Forcing consideration of the impact of an individual's historical interpretive horizon has implications for the bodies who occupy your classes. Therefore, your curriculum, is a culturally specific artifact that plays a primary role in either promoting the social order or deconstructing and reimagining a new one. Positioning curriculum as a cultural artifact compels consideration of the often veiled yet influential, quote, figures, end quote, in the curriculum. These figures include belief systems, values, behaviors, language, artistic expression, the environment in which education takes place, power relationships, and most importantly, the norms that affect our sense about what is right or appropriate. passive acceptance of these realities create dehumanizing experiences in our classes. There is nothing more dehumanizing in education for a student to say that I don't see myself reflected in this curriculum, that I don't see people who look like me teaching classes, that I don't see spaces through which I belong. Empowered by this mythology of colorblindness, curriculum orientations that are held captive to these normative ideas merely reproduce dominant ideas and assumptions about reality and knowledge. The end result is students who are not prepared to critically transform reality. Rather, we produce robots who lack critical sensibilities and cannot engage in positive dialogue around issues. Look at our society. We don't know how to talk to one another. We have no understanding. I blame our educational institutions. Our inability to teach our students dialogue merely creates a society where folk are not willing to listen to other people's stories. This is how inequality flourishes, because the mythos remains unsettled. As educators, you have a critical responsibility to play between the cracks, to think deeply and differently about education and knowledge. Lives are at stake. Children's lives are literally at stake. I refused to share a video of a little black girl that was literally dragged out of her classroom, literally pulled out of her seat and dragged out of her classroom because she was deemed as being unteachable. Children in rural and urban spaces every day are being taught an idea of sameness and neutrality. As bell hooks once said in Teaching to Transgress, there is no such thing as neutrality. Think about it. The educational institution in America is not even neutral. We hope to prepare people to live in a democratic society. That's not neutral. Is that neutral? You're not going to talk to me? Okay. That's not a neutral idea. We endeavor to create people who can engage in difficult dialogue, right? That develop democratic thinking skills. Those are not neutral ideas. Well, if those are not neutral ideas and we accept them, why is it that we have a problem handling difference in our spaces? I'll tell you why. Because the democracy that we know it was built on the backs of black and brown bodies. And it requires those same bodies to fuel it. This is capitalism itself. If we want to do something differently, we have to have the courage to imagine a new reality. Only a critical stance can overturn these realities. How much time do I have left? 5 minutes? Okay. Now, Du Bois, in his book, The Souls of Black Folk, introduced this idea of the double consciousness. Du Bois's idea of the double consciousness was really two looks. He argued that the black person in the United States, this is the early 20th century, the black person in the United States carried within themselves a two-ness. It was the look of the other and the look of the self that was determined by the look of the other. This is Du Bois. He says this two-ness reveals a pathology in black identity that lacks an intersectional analysis of identity. Thank you. I sweat standing still, y'all, so. It's like suspicious. Y'all like, is he going to get that sweat that's pulling off his face? Now, he says this two-ness reveals a pathology in black identity. Kevin Quashie in The Sovereignty of Quiet takes this further and says that this two-ness reveals a unique reality that accepts racial blackness as a prison house of struggle that is internalized, meaning that because of this reality, there are certain ideals that are internalized about the self based upon the messages that one receives from society. At the same time, The double consciousness reveals that there are certain epistemological tools for constructing identity, specifically black identity, that are overdetermined by a, quote, public and psychological wage of whiteness, end quote. Now, this reality produces a dynamic level of disciplinary power. I know I only have 3 minutes left, but I'm still having a hard time figuring out why we have a problem talking about whiteness. We endeavor to do justice or diversity, equity, and inclusion, but we won't talk about the issues that remain unsettled. I mean, the literal things and realities that we sit behind the curtain but pull the strings. Nobody in here is white. Everybody in here comes from a unique ethnic makeup. Whiteness is an invention of a racist system, just like blackness is. But we won't talk about the very things. It's like as a child, we wouldn't take the medicine because it hurt or it tastes funny. We refuse to take the very medicine that can liberate us from the realities that continue to bring us harm. I say this, and I say this with all truth. The thing that will destroy America is the very thing that it was built upon, racist ideas. Look at our news now. The very thing that will destroy this country is the very thing that we refuse to deal with. So I want to argue that there's this idea called visionary pragmatism that's a way of being that connects acting and doing and seeing. There must be a commitment that we in all endeavor to ascribe to, where we are committed to doing our own work, committed to looking deeply within ourselves and examining the inner visions that construct our reality. What were the messages that we received about others as children? How were we taught and who were we taught to value? What are the ways in which those ideas were communicated to us? As children, we learn race, we learn sex, we learn ableism, we learn all these things as children. My 7-year-old child, as I come to a close, came into my house 3 months ago while we were living in California. In California, this place that y'all think is the bastion of liberalism and progressivism. My 7-year-old child, he says, "Daddy, what kind of white am I?" My 7-year-old black boy, who's been educated in our public school system, came into his daddy's room and said, "Daddy, what kind of white am I?" He had already been receiving messages from his children and his classes calling him little brown boy, that he was different. We have an obligation as educators to be willing to engage in a critical space called jazz that requires that we first examine ourselves and the messages that we received as children, and then also requires that we begin imagining again, just as we once did as children. Because as we know, and as this quote says, without new visions, we don't know what to build. Only what to knock down. We only end up confused, rudderless, and cynical. But we forget that making a revolution is not a sense of clever maneuvers and tactics, but a process that can and must transform us. Our students, our babies, they need us now. And they which are willing to do the hard work of doing their own work can create emancipatory possibilities that can help us construct a new reality. But are you ready to change the way you see? Thank you.